Yes, I remember.
Started Do we,
Hot mics.
Okay.
Your pardon. Yeah. Good to know.
I think this is good enough. That's okay. Thank you. Take one. That's one. Okay. All right, friends, if we could make our way to our seats, we're gonna get started in just a moment. Welcome. Okay, would you hand one, Mr. Chuck? Sure. Thank you. Hey, Chuck,
George?
will you push that button with the circle around it?
Oh, it's live. Oh,
Yes.
Push this one here?
Yep.
Public comment.
Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. This is what I've been referring to as our interjurisdictional fire department meetings. Everybody's continued engagement here. I want to welcome the elected officials or appointees and staff of the Fire Authority Board to join us at the table. On your room up here.
There's some seriously comfortable couches.
Nice chair.
Sleeping.
I want to start with a minor caution to members of the public in the room that we're going to have a public comment section, and that's your time to offer comment. And so at the meeting of of course, this is normally a commissioners meeting. What comments? Anyone have any public comment? Do we see anybody? Does anyone on Zoom? Is anybody on Zoom? I don't see anybody in the room.
No comment.
Okay. The next thing on our agenda is meeting with municipalities, services, general improvement district, the directors. I've never said this stuff. We're now sitting. And if every fire authority board of directors to discuss fire protection response. We have this other thing. Stop facilitating. Start participating. Sorry, just quick question. Is Mitch Houston?
he's online.
Hi, Mitch. Also, Randy Wheelock is on the cloud. I saw him. Who else is participating?
Peter's on there too.
Also Peter Lippman.
Yeah, John Curtis. Who else do I have?
Hey, George, is there a mic near you?
There is not. Are you not hearing me well?
Yes, we're not hearing you very well.
We will fix that. Thank you.
If,
Aaron Crawley's on.
actually,
How about this one? Yeah.
yeah. You might put it right on the middle of that one.
Oh, yeah.
And
Test there.
And then
Peter, we're gonna go around the room and introduce ourselves. As we do so, after we do so, let us know how we're doing in the room. I'm George Marlin. I'm a Clear Creek County Commissioner. Jeanette?
Jeanette Beal, Town of Empire.
Wendy Cook, Town of Empire.
Beth Luther, Clear Creek County.
Holden Rollock, Clear Creek County.
Bolton's my new deputy county manager. Brian Bussard, county manager.
Mike Anderson, Idaho Springs representative for the Fire Authority.
Hi, Chuck Harmon, Idaho Springs.
Andy Marsh, Idaho Springs.
Lynette Kelsey, Police Judge for Georgetown.
Jonathan Barch, CDR Associates.
Kelly's here somewhere.
Kelly's here.
Mary Smith, Town of Georgetown.
Here he comes.
Robert Smith, candidate for County Commissioner.
Dude, Kelly.
Yeah, we just all shared our deepest, darkest secrets.
And it's your turn.
I'm Kelly, I'm with the fire authority.
Good enough.
Sorry, I was trying to inject a little humor. Peter. I'm mute.
I see it.
Okay, Peter Lichtman, County Attorney for Clear
Okay.
Creek.
How's the audio now?
It's great, thank you.
Okay, and Randy?
Randy, you there?
Yeah, the audio is great. Randy Wheelock, Clear Creek County Commissioner.
Okay, and Mitch?
Mitch Houston, County Commissioner from the East End.
John Curtis. too,
John
right?
Curtis, Idaho Springs.
And Aaron Crawley's on. We also have Chief Busick from Idaho Springs, Rebecca Lloyd, and a guest named Frank.
Okay. Who is one of those three has a formal role for us?
Forget who they were already.
The first one,
Aaron.
She's a candidate.
Aaron Crawley.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's,
Aaron, if Aaron wants to be a panelist, we can make him a
I
panelist.
did, I made him one.
I think the other two are right where they need to be.
Okay.
With that, I'm now, please, get us going.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully, we're gonna make a bunch of progress in terms of particularly about the IGA modification. We have three sort of ideas in terms of modification. We want to work through the first one, the board representation. There's some population data that we've talked about with selected areas for new board seats. Want to just talk about any sort of takeaways. I wasn't at the last meeting. Laura and I have talked quite extensively and looked at the notes, so I think I'm up to speed. But your takeaways from those discussion and any other details that are needed in terms of the IGA, I think we referenced the 6.9 and 6.10 in the existing IGA, so we want to talk about that. We want to, I think today is confirm the terms, if you will, of what's to be included in the board representation modification. So we want to start with that. Thinking that that's a relatively quick conversation based off of the previous ones, but we'll see. We want to then talk about how are we going to back into the work plan for the remaining IGA modification. So the idea is that we have a IGA to share for your boards and commissions by the 1st of November. That's the idea. We'll likely need a couple more meetings in between. We want to schedule those before, I think all of those, if we can, before the end of the meeting, and not to take up too much of this time scheduling, but getting them on the calendar, seeing what we can do to make sure that we can kind of meet that time frame. And then there are a couple of questions. One is about the length or the lifespan, if you will, of the modified IGA. The considerations of the funding increase, which, what are the changes beyond now to sort of the quote unquote funding cliff? When and how will you make a decision on the go, no-go decision on the Title 32, the special district? And then what are some additional details that are relevant to include in the IGA? So we want to sort of spend the time doing that. Be clear about and hopefully comfortable with the schedule upon doing that. Know that, and from many of our conversations, that we don't want to fall in the same position that we did a couple of years ago in terms of letting the IGA lapse. I think that's part of the goal. Then we thought we might take a break. This is 2.5 hours. Thanks so much for your time, for your extra time. Looking at the funding increase. So modification 2, which is the legality, and Peter, this is where we'll bring you in on the county commitment to a ballot initiative in the IGA. So if you include that in the IGA, what are some of those considerations? What's included in the interim funding increases, i.e. Idaho Springs Station, and then we'll move to the modification 3, which is the exploration of the Title 32 special district. So what does that mean? Again, we're not agreeing to a Title 32. I think what the agreement is it's about exploring that. So what is that? What are the details that are relevant to that? there is something that I think we've been talking about for the entirety of this effort, which is balancing flexibility and accountability and how we do that. And then are there other things that in terms of the Title 32 that are on I think this is what your homework about your wish list. So, we're not necessarily thinking we're going to solve that here today, like, what we're trying to do with confirm the terms and make sure we're good on the process, but we want to discuss those issues and funding, special district, and for that to inform the terms in the draft language. I need to say that I think this group has come a long way. You've come a long way. You've accomplished a lot. I think you've had conversations that have been necessary. I, both was so happy to hear about the progress you made last time, but from when I started to where we are now, boy, this feels like a manageable thing to do that we can, and I'm sure there's going to be discussions and differing perspectives of how to proceed, but I just wanted to compliment you all in terms of the work that you've done. So, does that sound like a meeting? Anything else to add to that list?
Yes, I would, I handed this out, I want to give an update on, I have to be the progress of the survey team and the progress of the fire authority board. We were tasked with defining better and we have. And let's go through that again.
Okay, when do you want to do that? Do you want to do that up front? Do you want to do that? I know that we'll likely have a draft survey at the next meeting.
I think so.
Um,
No, I'm saying, I think we'll have a draft of the next one of these meetings, I think. That's all.
Do you see value in? I'll ask the same question from Kelly. Do we see value in asking for early feedback on this better plan? Or is this not a good use of our time today?
So describe it just a little bit what it is that we're looking from the better to the best, in terms of, this is a sales tax amount, right?
The consultant for the survey said, we need to develop options. And good, better, best. And best is our best attempt to show the cost of the mission CIT recommendations wholly, with some addition of some other stuff. Better is, good is like, what's the bare minimum we think we need? Better is like, what's a little better than that? And in the last meeting, we described best, we went through good, we tasked the survey team and the fire authority board with coming up with better.
Yeah.
And that was done. So that's what that is about. And I would say maybe we put it at the end, we have time.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
Financing is the number one issue.
right. And so we have, in terms of funding increase under, sort of right after the break. So maybe that fits there as well.
We need to know agreement on the financing really before we can progress with anything else. Other than signing the existing IGA.
Mm-hmm. The way we were going to start today was on the board representation piece, which is obviously governance versus finance. And then we work through the sort of the plan to get us to make sure we have a functioning IGA, and then we get to the funding piece. And so I think we can just hold that until that time, and I think we'll get at it. I think just to be clear, the bare minimum, good, a little bit better than the bare, and the best is the mission CIT in terms of the funding amounts. And there's been general agreement for a long time about the fact that there needs to be more funding. And so that's kind of where what happens in this modified IGA going forward. How do you want to look at that, the sources? Am I getting that right? Okay, so let's jump in. Beth, could I have the next slide?
Maybe.
So we've talked about three modifications to the existing IGA. The big one being about, and this goes back to some of the earlier conversations about the challenges of the existing governance and representation. and afternoon. And so this is a summary, I think, from last time, which is a desire for up to, and we're talking about the interim, we're not talking about the length of time of this modification, but up to 3 additional board seats for highly populated areas and unincorporated county, bringing the total number of board seats to 11 as outlined here, which is Idaho Springs 2, Georgetown 2, Empire 1, Silver Plume 1, at large without a location, 2 county appointed seats, and then 3 at large, and they'd be population based. And I think that Jeremy was developing the population based approach, but seats filled by residents. I think that the intent is to have the 3 population based folks be from different areas of the county. There's an interest in community and a commitment to this idea of community selection of those reps without limiting the flexibility by including a new formal process in the IGA. And then reevaluating the population density depending on the time to maintain that representation that's responsive to, population growth and change and all of that. And so this is basically, as I understand it, a summary of the conversation that you had from the last meeting on the 22nd. Thoughts on this? Have I mischaracterized the governance, the sort of the idea here about where we're going?
Oh, looks good.
Yeah.
Jeremy developed the map. We've been real busy today, so he's not gonna make it unless maybe he'll show up later.
Okay.
But it's done and it divided the unincorporated area into 3 areas. We had discussion that 11 people would be a difficult board. It's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is just our discussion between him and I, is that we were talking about leaving the existing representation as it is and add another seat for the ESD, giving them 3 seats. While we were talking, we couldn't come up with anything that we could quantify as to how there is misrepresentation out there.
Currently.
Because we do everything based on the entire community. So all the decisions are based on the entire community rather than specific areas. Other than we have to adjust to call load and stuff like that, which is a dynamic operational thing. So that's where we left that.
So that's a little different than what's on the board.
Well, yeah, that was where it was going, but this is discussion afterwards between the 2 of us as to how it works, how it actually works currently, and what we think would work and still functional and provide a quality service.
So I think one of the things we're talking about is the number of people on the board, and there are boards that are larger. There's obviously boards that are smaller, and the more that you have, you increase participation and representation. You also increase the number of voices and perspectives, and I think that's right. And so that's that the 11, that's part of the balance I think you've been talking about, and then the entire community, and that's sort of from an operational response piece, is that you don't operate and that here what we're really talking about is that broader perspective across versus an operation, governance versus operation.
Well, I think we have a pretty broad view of it based on what we do. The St. Mary's area, I don't think is underrepresented. We built a new fire station there. We have 2 people living in that fire station. There's a new truck there, essentially. there's no volunteer base there to pull from. You have to pass a drug screen. There's not enough response activity up there to keep a volunteer base interested. The majority of our calls up there are medical, so training volunteers to be medical first responders, that's easier than training them to be firefighters, but you know, the demographics there they're not underrepresented. They're very well covered based on how remote that is. Floyd Hill area, Saddleback, that's now we have a new station we built on Floyd Hill. It's got rooms for 3 people to live there as firefighters. No volunteer base there. We've had a couple over the years. But the demographics of the people that live there are not volunteer demographics based on the income range and the their lifestyle stuff, upper age levels. You know, the average majority of volunteers that volunteer for firefighting are younger males with a single job revenue, and they do it in their spare time. It's pretty rare to have anybody above that demographic. So Saddleback area actually was probably the driver for us to de-Bruce back in 2006. And we have that remote area of Blue Valley, up 103, Miners Candle area, that type stuff. A volunteer base there historically. And we don't have a station there, but those are all areas that take longer to get to.
I want to hear what others have to say, but so
Yeah.
part of it is that this isn't about the response. This is about the voice of that area on this board, right? So I think if I'm understanding what you're talking about is the nature of the volunteers and the infrastructure and the facilities. And I think this is about how do we create for the interim for a IGA that's modified, address this issue of representation. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand, Lynette.
First of all, I like the idea of adding more voices from the county in general. What I can foresee as maybe being an issue, aside from that larger board perhaps having difficulty coming to agreement,
Yep.
is making a quorum, because right now we already have, the county has 2 voices and they've only had 1 appointment in the last several years.
Right.
And so I would hate to have the board, the increase in size and run into that same difficulty of not being able to find interested people to serve on it. And then you wind up meeting after meeting, not being able to make a quorum because you've got 11 people that are supposed to be there and you can't fill enough seats on a regular basis, which then makes you dysfunctional.
Mhm.
I believe that speaks to what Kelly said.
If I can throw my voice in there, and I also actually, Beth, you told me that Randy has had his hand raised.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Brandon, we can't see you on there. Thanks, Beth.
I think he got his hand up before I did.
Okay.
I was actually letting you know about Randy.
Oh, thanks, Randy. Go ahead.
No, he's muted.
At least
Um,
that way.
how's that? Can you hear me
There you go.
now?
Yes, sir.
I think that what Jonathan said in response to Kelly was important. I think what Kelly said is important too, and I agree with it, that there's not been a lack of even-handed, big picture representation that's been expressed by the current board. I think where it came up was that we looked at a couple of things as we talked about how the board could be made better. It was about, as Jonathan said, having those voices on the board. That's how I recall it came. And also, as we talked about the different forms that the governance organization might move into, what everyone brought up that it was important that they maintain representation. And that, of course, generated our, the subject of what about those larger areas that would perhaps want to have a voice into it too. And as far as a quorum goes, I think that can be represented. I mean, it should come out the same at the end of the day, but I think if the quorum can be defined as that percentage of the number of people who are currently seated on the board, if there's a seat that's vacant at the current time that doesn't have an appointment, then maybe that doesn't need to be in the denominator when determining a quorum. And I've seen it done that way in a lot of organizations I've been in. So I think that's a surmountable goal. More people shouldn't make it tougher to make a quorum if you're trying to get a certain percentage of them. And anyway, that's all I had to say for right now. I don't think this was ever a question of whether the current board or whether the fire district itself has been trying to treat everybody out there that needs service equally.
And I'll add, just echo what Randy ended with. At the operations level, there's equity in service delivery.
Right.
I believe that. I think what we're talking about is voices on the board. Board doesn't do operations. Randy, you covered the quorum thing. I think that's resolvable as well. Although it's valid. Make sure we'll be creating an organization that can have a board that can meet. My perspective on this, and you guys have heard me kind of grouse about this before, is the IGA structure. One of the challenges that it has is the number of voices that are necessarily at the table. It's 27 separate elected officials that form this organization. And I've gotten over that. I've come to accept that we can live with organization that every once in a while we've got to spend a year meeting every couple weeks for hours to figure it out.
Oh, that's what we're doing?
Yeah. And I think I would encourage us to embrace that at the level of the board of this organization as well. I think that equity in voices really matters. And when you look at the populations, the population of the unincorporated area is roughly 3,000, and the sum of the population of the municipal areas is roughly 3,300. That's how we landed at the number of 5 unincorporated representatives. And I just want to ask you all to sort of hear that. The issue that I haven't heard come up, and I'm going to bring it up myself, so that you guys don't feel like you have to attack anybody on the ESD board, is that would this create too much power by one entity? I think we need to make that concern explicit. I want to say it for you, because maybe it's an awkward thing to say at us. And I think what we can do, I think we can design around that. I think we can come up with policy approaches to protect the independence of these 3 additional seats, so that basically they're not, as our appointees all currently do, report to the appointing entity. I think that we can have the ESD board nominate rather than appoint. I think we can give them a term. And I think we give the power to remove that individual with the CCFA board, not with the ESD. So that basically the ESD board goes out, they solicit people, they get a nomination. That person goes to the CCFA board for a confirmation. They're there for an established term, maybe that's 4 years. At which point that process the ESD board would have the ability to renominate or nominate somebody else, but during that 4 years, they're on there. The only reason they would be removed from that board is if the majority of the CCFA board thinks they should be removed. That way, they're there to represent their neighborhoods. And I think if we can kind of think a little bit about that, about how do we make sure that those voices are not reporting to the ESD board, then the only outstanding issue is we're forming an organization with a big board, and we see these organizations work. We know that those conversations take longer, and I think that in the IGA model, that's just one of the things that you embrace. So sorry for the long.
So a couple things there, just if I understand it. One is that so the importance of sort of this voice at the table, not in terms of coverage or operations, that's the sort of that equity is there. It's really about broadening the voices. We've talked about this. It comes at a cost. It comes at a cost of additional members and particularly time, and that ability to sort of work through those issues. Big boards are easier sometimes. And sometimes they're harder in my experience, given depending on the composition and the structure of it. And then this is the issue of the power or issue, which is about some means for about how they're nominated, how they're appointed in terms, and an opportunity for removal if necessary. Brian.
Randy.
Oh, Randy, again, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something that was already just said, but it's because I want you to hear it from me too, to reiterate something George just said. I have zero interest in trying to increase the power of the ESD board, or the Board of County Commissioners over the Fire Authority Board. It's just a matter of trying to find a good governance model that brings representation, finds us the money that we need. And I've heard the towns mostly say almost pretty emphatically that they don't want to see a loss of their representation. And so I agree with that and understanding that. Then it's a matter of how do you balance representation. But it isn't a matter of me trying to get for the BOCC the ability to appoint 5 members of the board and gain control of it at all. I think that would be, actually, I think that would, from my perspective, without anybody else's opinion involved, I think that would be a terrible thing to do. I think that what that does is it reduces the voice of the people on the board as opposed to increasing it. And if the object of bringing these other seats in is to increase and give more voice to the community on the board, then the worst thing we can do is put more power than the 2 we can appoint now into the hands of the Board of County Commissioners. That's my opinion.
I see your head.
I agree.
So we have the issue of quorum. I think we've talked a little bit about that, about how we can sort of ensure that it's a percentage of those that are seated to avoid that. We've talked about, sort of the size of the board, and I think there's making a conscious choice about increasing representation and the voices at the cost of managing a larger board. That there's a method and an approach heard from both, George and Randy about a way of how those 3 additional county appointed seats, or maybe it's not county appointed, it's county nominated and CCFA appointed seats. It might be a better way to sort of characterize that. And what else? What else do we need to talk about in terms of if those are workable strategies here? And we'll talk more about that. Andy, is that a thought that I see percolating on your forehead? No?
Just a question for the group. I just did some math around the populations.
Is this what you passed around?
No, it's a separate spreadsheet. If you guys would like, I showed it to Rick. I showed it to the people, my neighbors. If you guys would like to see a printed copy, I'm sure that Brian or Colton or Beth can go print copies. Would that be helpful?
Sure.
What is it that we're?
It just lists the populations of the entities.
Okay.
Just to do some math.
And the math and the population of the entities relates to the number of
Representatives. Yeah.
Okay. Could we just project it?
Yeah.
Because then the folks online can
you share?
see that as well.
I am sharing the presentation now. I have to take this down. Does somebody have that document? And
Can he share?
Top of your inbox.
Thanks, Beth.
find it? Hold on.
Peter, while we're waiting on this, anything strike you there as concerning or unachievable from a process procedural standpoint about the 11-member board and how those three county nominated board CCFA appointed members would be brought on? Anything there from that discussion?
Not from a legal perspective at all. I think this is much more of a policy determination.
Okay. Yeah. John Curtis, did you want to weigh in on anything here? I think one of the things we're looking for in a few minutes is to say, is this workable? Can we, sort of move forward with that assumption? And then work with the other aspects that would be modified, please.
Yeah, I think anything's workable. It's just making that right balance.
Okay.
So I'll talk you guys through the, you've got, column C has, column A lists the jurisdiction. Column C in this title, is the population of those jurisdictions. Column D is the number of reps. So all I did is I did some math to figure out the population of the unincorporated portion of the CCFA. I summed up the municipal areas. And then I came down and I calculated this is per municipal representative, there's 550 people inside a municipality. And I did some cross multiplication. Parity would be 5.3. Obviously, we're not going to appoint a third of a person, so I rounded down in making the ask that we add 3 seats. And then I listed what in my mind were 4 underrepresented areas, just based on the discussion from last week. But I think if CCFA staff has come up with a way to make it 3, I think that sounds better. I also I think another policy is that we shouldn't have more than 1 appointee from one of these areas. So that there's always an opportunity for somebody in one of those districts. And if nobody's taking the opportunity, then we have a board of 10 or not, So any thoughts on that?
George, thanks for that work. It looks like particularly after what Kelly said about same areas, which I wholeheartedly agree with, that maybe if we were going to pick 3, it looks like Blue Valley, DLD, and Floyd Hill. Just my thoughts.
Or my understanding, Kelly, this map covers the whole unincorporated area and breaks it into 3 blocks, right?
Essentially, yes.
I mean, as of right now, and I haven't seen that, I'm have confidence that we can just come up with 3 areas.
So that gives kind of a structure about how those 3 or where those 3 county nominated board I gotta get my nomenclature. County nominated CCFA appointed members. Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I took my hand back down. I was gonna say that it feels like, I think Kelly was speaking to the fact that, there's a firehouse up there and stuff like that. I don't know that speaks as well to the population of the area. St. Mary's has and York Gulch have a pretty large population up in there. And it seems like that would need to be one of the areas. That's my gut reaction. I don't know if Blue Valley lumps in with Floyd Hill because we're really talking about a smaller portion of the Floyd Hill area that falls within the fire district. But those are just my first knee-jerk reactions to it when I looked at it, because I hadn't seen this yet, obviously, so either.
Can you say your summary again, Randy? I'm sorry, I missed that.
What? Say which part again?
What do the numbers say in terms of the underrepresented areas? I
think St. Mary's and York Gulch have a pretty large population among them. And I think that I can't speak to what the population in Blue Valley is, but I was thinking that the Saddleback area of Floyd Hill, or the area of Floyd Hill that's more western, that is within the district, and Blue Valley might work as a combined total of representation for the two of them. Maybe there's one from Blue Valley and Floyd Hill. That's just my immediate reaction, because St. Mary's and York Gulch seem like a pretty large area, pretty large population area.
Okay.
Jeremy had, St. Mary's and York Gulch were in together. And I believe the Saddleback, Floyd Hill, Blue Valley area was together.
Right, that's the way I'd see it. Same.
And Highway 103, DLD, and stuff to the west, because going west of there, the unincorporated population is pretty low.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else? Thoughts, reflections on this? Okay. So, maybe just a question for this group then, which is, are we assuming that we can address the issue of quorum, that we look at sort of how the three new members are both nominated and appointed, and how and those pieces around the term, about the sort of this choice that we're making, that from to broaden the number of voices, is this something that this group can support? And then we sort of see some heads nodding. Maybe we could see kind of like thumbs up, thumbs to the side. I don't know if I can see, or just verbally from the folks on the Zoom call. And Randy, I assume based on your comments, you're supportive of this modification to the board representation based on that, but I don't want to assume that. So, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. John or Mitch.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. How about in the room here? Any objections? Great. All right, let's move on. Well done. We'll let Beth get us back to the So wanted to say, again, we're making good progress. Want to give a plan for how we're going to work through this. We're following up with from last meeting. The IGA modifications, we need to, the topics there, as outlined in the agenda, are the lifespan of the modified IGA. How long are we talking about? How and when we'll make a decision on a Title 32 special district. I think we've been talking about it as a go, no go. And then discuss interim funding solutions. And so, so the idea is here, September 6th, our next meeting, is we want to finalize the terms for those next modifications, 2 and 3. Modifications 2 is the funding increase, and 3 is the exploration of the special district. We want to make sure by the 1st of October that we have enough to give to Peter to be able to revise or to modify the IGA. And then the suggestion was that we go line by line in our meetings in October. And if it's 1 meeting, great. If it's 2 meetings, we take that. But we want to have something by the 1st of November to be able to share with your board for board approval. So I wanted just to, make sure that we were on the same page as it relates to process and what needs to happen. Again, you guys are super easy today. We're gonna get out of here at 2 o'clock.
Had 8 minutes.
No, we got a lot to do, actually. I shouldn't have said that. Are there other modifications? I guess that, like, things that we're gonna put in the work plan that we want to make sure that we have a discussion. Are there other topics as we get to, like, so for example, we've just agreed to the board representation modification 1. I think that's a big step. I mean, it's something that we've been talking about since I got involved. we'll jump into 2 and 3 here on the funding and the sort of what does that process look like for the Title 32? Is there anything else in this work plan that we should put in there? Because we don't want to get to the 1st of November and have, wait, sometimes we call those 11th hour things, and sometimes they just happen. Sometimes new issues come up. But we want to the extent possible here today, say, yeah, these are the topics and this is the schedule that we're gonna look at. Anything else that we want to make sure that we hit on this?
I don't know if this is a make sure we hit it, but I'm reading through this idea. And I see language that may not continue to be necessary, right? Like, there's language in here about the work that we've already completed with Mission CIT. Like, so I just want to sort of like, what I imagine is that when the attorneys get their hands on this, there's gonna be other edits. And I don't have anxiety about them, but I want to just check and see if anybody else does about like stuff like that, like redundancies, anachronisms.
There's a cleanup process, and
I may be able to just comment on that. I've already started addressing some of those issues. Even things such as establishing a grievance and appeals procedure for employees. That's holdover language from years and years ago. So by now we should have something. So I have comments in a draft that I'm putting together that will address some of these issues, as well as, for example, there's a section that deals with the RFP. That's obviously going to change. There's also a section that talks about other governing mechanisms that will be enhanced based on the discussions that we're having today.
Yeah. But I think the question for this group of policymakers is, sort of giving direction for Peter and company to continue doing that, to clean up, to make a relevant, updated IGA that reflects obviously the terms that we're talking about, but also reduces and eliminates redundancies and other pieces. So I see a bunch of heads nodding, and I'm glad to hear, Peter, that you've gotten started. I assume that's exactly what I was going to ask, which is I'm assuming that folks here want to see those red line edits, Peter. So I figured you were in court doing it that way.
Yeah, that is definitely how I'm doing it.
Should we work that into the work plan?
Well, and it could be the meeting 3 and 4 here, line by line review of changes.
Right.
I'm
I think we
assuming
had talked about that last time, that hopefully by October, I'd be able to bring you, once I knew those, within a meeting of that, I'd be able to bring you those red lines, because I imagine that's going to require at least 1 or 2 more meetings once you look at those red lines.
Yeah. And then we just do kind of like the yeoman's work of just going, everybody's best time in life is kind of going line by line. But in my experience, it's valuable time for all of us to get on the same page. And then we come together around and sort of, thumbs up around that with the red line, with the line by line review. And that's why we've kind of thought, there'd be a couple meetings in October. Work? Okay, tell me if you're, folks online, I have a hard time seeing you. I can only see one person at a time. Mitch and Randy and John, just let me know if there's something there. I guess you'll know. Okay, good. So maybe let's just keep going for modifications 2 and 3. Rather than take a break, we have, let's just jump into it. Funding increase. Can you go to the next slide? Sorry. So modifications 2 and 3. Here's where we are. We're going to try to take these as far as we can. The first question, as I understand it from the last, is about in the IGA, is this group able to make a county commitment to a ballot initiative within a IGA? And Peter, I'll turn that to you.
Sorry, I lost you for a second because I was on mute. Could you repeat your question though?
Sure, So for looking at modification 2 to the existing IGA, I think it's clear, we've talked about it, is that we're in the red. There's a need for funding increase within this, and the discussion is about, I think one of the questions was about the legality of a commitment from the county to a ballot initiative within this IGA. Can it be and not only maybe the legality, I think that sort of the wisdom of whether or not to do that is sort of the question here. So from your legal perspective, Peter?
Sure. So we can put language in the agreement that will say that the parties agree to work on putting together a Title 32, doing the process, going through it, and set timelines for that. The issue is simply if we don't meet those timelines, we would simply put in what happens then and how we're going to deal with it. But we can definitely put that requirement in there. The fact is that we either do it or we don't. And if we don't, and depending on how long this agreement remains in effect, that may determine what next steps are. So what I'm saying is if we don't meet the timelines that we set for actually pursuing a Title 32, if there's agreement among the parties to pursue that, presumably the term of this agreement should end, and then we'll be back to where we are right now. But we can put something, we just can't say in the agreement that by such and such a date, there will be a Title 32, because of course, that's completely dependent on the voters as to whether that exists. So there needs to be at least a contingency if that doesn't come about as well.
Well, and I think the question was, one, that this group hasn't decided whether you want to do a Title 32 or not. So that the agreement is really about pursuit of that and exploration of the Title 32. And then I think that regardless of a Title 32 or not, there's a need for funding increase.
Right.
And so the question, and presumably all funding increases, I assume, significant ones are going to require a ballot, and whether or not to include that, and what I hear you saying is that you can talk about in terms of what the parties agree to in general, but the timeline is a particular problem associated with that, especially since we have yet to get to the term of the IGA itself. Am I missing something? Am I getting
No,
that?
I think you're absolutely right. They are related. Right now, the current IGA even has a small section that says that the CCFA will periodically review other governance models, but we would obviously need to beef that up significantly. And I think that's where the parties need to agree. So for example, are we going to try to get a petition together to move it forward within a year? And if we don't meet that deadline, what happens then? And each subsequent step as to what the goal is, so that it's actually a planned out thing. And that also will give the fire authority the ability to have some measure of assurance. For example, if we make this agreement 3 to 5 years because we think that's how long it may take, then they at least know that they've got this current agreement valid until the establishment of that Title 32 or the expiration of the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to reiterate, it's important for us to understand the goal is not to write a decision about a Title 32 into this document. The goal is not to write any goals associated with when you would get petitions signed. The goal is to write a process for evaluation. And while I have the floor, I'll share, I could be persuaded that this doesn't need to get into the IGA. I have mixed feelings. I like the idea that this conversation, this multi-jurisdictional conversation, is going to continue.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea that we're going to continue to evaluate governance models. So I'll just stop there and just let you know that this, as one member of the ESD board, I'm not 100% that I have to insist that we modify the Title 32 language that's in there right now.
And the existing Title 32 language, is that in 610? Is that what you're referring to, periodically investigate other organizational models for providing regional, okay.
That is
Yeah. Sorry, Peter.
Okay, so no, that's absolutely correct. And, you know, maybe I was misinformed, but I thought there wanted to be more clarity in that as far as that. But if if the group wants to leave that generally, you know, that's fine as well. Then if that indeed is the case, and that's where the group lands, then I imagine what I'm understanding is the focus is to create a very strong IGA here. So we've in certain ways have moved from the original talk, maybe 9 months ago, 10 months ago, to it sounds like maybe we're circling back to making this IGA more representative to address some of the financial issues and any of the other outliers. But if I'm misunderstanding, obviously I need the direction from the group because that will inform how I draft this or redraft it.
What do y'all think?
He was just showing me what it's, I mean, it is, I think it's specific enough. I kind of agree. I don't know that it has to say anything more. Simply because we have all said, we're not sure yet. Let's deal with what we have to deal with first and we'll circle back around to it. It does sound like there's enough commitment that we will continue to investigate it. Exactly the way the current IGA describes it. If it gets more specific, then yeah, then we're agreeing to things before we're agreeing to it, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, whatever, you know, we can write up whatever, but the intent, as I understand it, is to the pursuit of and the consideration of Title 32 as, you know, not necessarily a commitment to doing so, that there's not a commitment to doing so without that exploration. And I think our next modification has to do with, so what does that actually mean to look at and explore Title 32, special district? What's the information you'll need? What will be, you know, that kind of stuff. But for the IGA piece on the ballot initiative within the IGA, it sounds like what we've got there is sufficient.
I would agree. I think building a lot more commitment and detail is to me, it slows down the process. None of us can see that far into the future. Some of us are term limited, won't be here to further to the discussion. So I think making sure that it is constantly, regularly reviewed so that you aren't just pushing it off and waiting for that deadline to roll around again, I think is sufficient. So.
I see heads nodding here. I don't think I can see Randy Wheelock or Mitch on there.
Andy said yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me make one clarification after reading carefully this language. I do think that it's this group and not the Fire Authority Board that should be conducting this investigation. And the language currently says the authority shall. I think this would be an agreement amongst us to basically reconvene to do it.
So this is the
IGA partners.
IGA
basically.
partners. Are there other, well, maybe I'll just flag that maybe we look at some of the other term language in the versus not necessarily now, but the IGA partner language versus the authority. That, Peter, that might be a topic for us to sort of look throughout, where is like, where are we being clear about where the IGA partners are directing versus the authority itself. And so, okay, good suggestion there. Mitch, do you have any thoughts on this?
It seems to me that the partners still have to figure out a way to increase revenue in the short term, even if that doesn't get us to everybody's subsequent goal of funding levels. It seems to me that needs to happen. And I think that fits into your first bullet under modification 2, perhaps, which is how do we get some more revenue in the very short term?
Yep. And is that a good time to turn to your better, the spreadsheet that you had talked about here, which was baseline, better, best, kind of, or bare minimum, I guess is that the time to turn to that about additional revenue?
I think so. I have a curveball in my mind a little bit, but it's not related to anything on this agenda. So
Okay.
I should just nothing like that.
Yeah.
Brian's proud of me.
Yeah,
He got there on his own.
Parking and parking lots and stuff, bus depots or whatever. Let's stay with the funding part. Let's keep your curveballs unless they're gonna, at the moment.
I reprinted this because I just realized that I missed a column, trying to make it larger.
Sorry for your eyes. We've got a version for your eyes and then we've got a version for that has descriptions.
The I one is this one.
Yeah.
Well, read the other one and then just glance at the
Small
small
one.
one.
Thank you.
Whoa, sorry.
I got it.
And so part of the funding increase in the short term, do you have one?
Yeah, I think he gave you. Yep.
Oh, sorry. This, okay. Has to do with the survey results too, because and so just kind of keeping that in mind as we talk about this. So, we've agreed from the minute, at least I got involved, there's a need for increased funding. What is that funding gonna be? What are we what's included in it? How much do you need? What's included in that? The mission CIT being the sort of the best, if you will, or the one that meets the standards, the national standards is the most. So what are we looking at here then in these three columns?
Yes. Short.
Can you put that on the screen, please?
I'll email it to all of them.
You sure?
Sorry, John.
John, that's gonna be in your email inbox in just a moment. Thank you for.
Okay.
Pointing that out.
So we went through good and best. Best is everything in the mission CIT report. Best requires $5.3 million roughly in additional revenues. That would be, if wholly funded by sales tax, 2.1%. Or a 1% sales tax additional. Then we talked about good last meeting too. Good is filling our current budget deficit. Having 6 firefighters and 1 inspector, which is determined to be kind of the minimum from the mission CIT recommendations. With respect to staffing, funding a wage increase based on our most recent wage study. And building, and that mission CIT recommended capital fund. That's good, that's better, that's best. Better, the fire authority board sat and we looked at best and we said, who's gonna argue for things that have to be included in better? Mostly a staff driven recommendation. What we moved over is highlighted in yellow. It has, in one column, it says fire marshal and the other one, it says fire inspector. The minor nuance that I don't want us to trip over. It's basically the difference is conducting arson investigations. We have several captains that already are qualified to conduct fire investigations. Otherwise, we would be hiring an inspector that could do plan review, inspections, and like referral responses. And Kelly, tell me when I'm getting it wrong or you just want to. So better includes everything from good and everything in yellow from best. The highlights of those are the year-round mitigation crew. Captain, the recommendation for a captain position, we're sort of combining some things, saying a captain assigned to training, health and safety. Because you see a health and safety FTE and training FTE in addition to a captain recommendation. So we collapsed those 3. You see overtime pay, a limited overtime pay program. And these numbers need to be worked on to make sure that they're accurate. We're not gonna have the data we need until the end of the year to really know what that will cost. We have a bunch of new staff and we don't know, I shouldn't say a bunch, we have new staff. And it's gonna take us a year to know how much overtime they're actually using. Just for some context, currently what we do is we offer people extra time off as overtime pay. The recommendation is to just pay them cash. So that number, if you math in your head quickly, you'll realize that the limited overtime pay is just the full overtime pay divided by 4. So I wouldn't call this a precise number. Last is part-time firefighter pool. And that is the same number with a note largely for staff to investigate what that number might look like. We could choose to limit it. So that's what's in better. That leaves 3.6 million to fund with taxes. Could be, if it was sales tax only, 1.45% sales tax rate increase. These are all new. This is new revenue, new mills. If we were going to try to do a split, it would be a 1% sales tax, an additional mill of 4.62, which magically lands us where Kelly has been talking about of 9 mills and what the municipalities have committed to and already largely funded. What am I missing, Kelly? Hi, Jerry.
You got it.
And we're staying on the better, currently on the better, right?
That's where we would like to be.
9 mills.
So a couple of things related to the survey. After looking at this, I think the survey's team's recommendation is that we survey around better. Or maybe we avoid the step that might not be necessary is figuring out if people think about an 11.5 mil increase and a 1% sales tax. Maybe we already can guess. Yeah.
No.
So there's that. And then the other thing is I think we can get a lot of value out of this by just hearing any early feedback. I'm sorry, there's something that's missing here. Better includes, in addition to the $500,000 annual capital fund, which they say will fund apparatus, equipment, and basically station repair. That's what Mission CIT says. There is $125,000 a year as a fire station capital fund for like big investments in fire stations. I think the nod is that Idaho Springs, as the fire authority's gone through, Idaho Springs is sort of next in line to get into the fire station. And that number also needs to be sort of made real, right? That would allow us to build a capital fund. It would allow us maybe to have some type of bond against. But we don't, I mean, that was a wild guess, kind of. I think that's all the context. I think what's helpful is, do people disagree with the recommendation to be pulling around better? And do people have early feedback on what better should include? The survey will mention sort of the highlights of what's in better.
Mitch.
Greetings. Question for George, since he was doing math. Did you, when you talked about the funds that 1% sales tax brings in, was that a global amount, or did you divide that between 2 fire protection districts?
That is the unincorporated and municipal area of the fire authority area only. We have high confidence in that number.
Okay.
It's based on actual data from our finance director.
Great. So
Not evergreen.
not evergreen. But right now you can't do a tax. Right now you can't do a tax on part of the county. So whatever was raised in evergreen would be used to benefit their fire department.
I believe so. I think that's I think what the conversation has been assuming. The survey team spent a fair amount of time talking about whether to model the countywide tax base or just the CCFA tax base. We decided to model and poll just the CCFA area, because we got to find a way to simplify this conversation. When we are serious about getting on the ballot, if we are serious about a countywide sales tax, of course, we'll have to add that in.
Well, I think when you have to add in the evergreen side, If you work with the Evergreen Fire Department about their capital needs and you make it clear that what's collected in their district is going to support their department, I think you'll probably do fine.
Okay. Other thoughts? So the idea and maybe Brian, do you want to talk about sort of what the survey, like, so I think for next agenda, we'll have the survey. Oh, John, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is all calculated on everybody paying 9 mils, correct? Plus a 1% sales tax.
The
The better scenario is, yeah.
The better scenario, yes.
The mill portion would, the only way to fund with mills in an IGA setting is for us all to contribute independently. And so, yes, I think the short answer is yes. And then there's some conversation to be had about how to sequence, right? I'm an advocate of asking for the sales tax first. And I'll stop there because obviously that's 2 ballot measures. I think the last thing we want to do is put 2 tax increases for the same service on the same ballot.
I agree.
Right. What's the question again?
The survey sort of like, so if we are in agreement with, you know, to really test the better approach with the survey, I know that we'll have that on the agenda for next time,
Yeah.
but you want to just say sort of more about that, maybe the mechanics of
Well, we've been working more on the intro, if you remember it's written like a newsletter, and we've really been focusing all of our time on the intro. How do you tell the story of the fire authority? How do you tell the story of all the good work that's going on, except we can't fund it, all that kind of stuff, right? And I think we really got to a point in our last meeting yesterday where going through this document, it's now understood what we're surveying against in terms of that number. And so the consultant is now going back to his word editor and is going back through all that work that we've just done, and then now modifying the survey based on that. So
Okay.
I don't have specific questions to give you right now, but we'll have that before the next meeting. We'll get it out beforehand, so you get a chance to read it before the meeting.
great. So the next meeting, we'll need to make sure to coordinate with their schedule. Yeah. John, go ahead.
Oh, you're muted, John.
Forgot to take my hand down, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I didn't understand.
Forgot to take his hand.
Oh, okay. All right, well, more than on the, about sort of what would be included in sort of the better and the interim funding, increase. 1% sales tax, 9.1 mil, 9.2 mil levy, sort of, and so that'd be an increase of, what's that, 4.4 or something? 4.6. Do we need to get more specific about what's included in the interim funding? Should we give you a chance to kind of take a look at this and see if there's others anything else that needs to be included in the better is like a must-have kind of idea? Or are you comfortable with as is? Or is it just late on the afternoon on Friday and looks all right?
Can you show me where, I know we had mentioned like a new station, where would that be in here?
Fire Station Capital Fund, is that right?
About halfway through that column vertically.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And is that sufficient?
We need to work on that number.
Okay.
The
125.
125.
It's only sufficient if we get to 9 mils for everybody.
And that's the assumption there is that.
Yeah, that mill levy would have to come up.
Really?
The sales tax would probably cover the amount above the 9. Like when you're going to 9.01 or whatever that is, 9.19. I think that sales tax would cover that for sure. Because that capital money, along with the existing reserve fund, will cover those capital needs to include a new station. Unless the price on that's gone up to 12 million, which is possible.
Just cut stuff.
And then it wouldn't cover it, but that's something we have to look at.
I think the other part of the answer to the question is $125,000 a year enough to build a fire station and keep going?
Right.
And I mean, after 10 years, you've got 1.25 million. So after 40 years, right? You could self-fund. I think the idea here is that you would either you'd be building a grant match fund, you'd be going after USDA, you'd be going after mineral impact, and not trying to tell the voters that they need to come out of their pockets for the entire. And I think we've done that. Well, I don't know. What's the history of our success with using state or federal money to?
All of our new buildings have had DOLA money.
Mhm.
It's pretty limited for federal money.
About half.
Half of it?
Yeah, like what?
Oh, no, Station 6 on Floyd Hill, I believe, was half, but the others have been limited to 200,000 DOLA funds because they changed their formulas.
Mhm.
So we've,
50/50.
So I think the question comes back to, is this enough? Is enough here with the goal of keeping mills below 10, or is it at 9? What was the goal?
the goal would be, I think the goal could still be 9, and we would still have plenty for building a station and taking care of vehicles and all of
Apparatus.
that stuff.
And I think the fire authority board could decide if it gets these revenues and the ballot measure lets them, could decide to do something like, hey, we're gonna hold off on some of these hires for 2 years. Mission CIT doesn't recommend hiring all these people right away anyway. We're gonna build up a capital fund real quick, right? We're gonna spend a couple of years building up a capital fund. I think that's a conversation the CCFA board can and should have. In this golden scenario where we get this IGA, we get a tax measure passed, we blah, blah, blah.
Well, we have to build an addition onto the Georgetown station before we can put any more staff on that, so. But the idea of adding those 6 people would be that we have 2 people 24/7 at the Dumont station that could go either direction.
So that would be 2 in Georgetown, 2 in Idaho Springs, 2 in Duke.
So the
6 additional firefighters is sort of the vision for that again, just so that.
yeah, and that's in the good, the good is the minimum we should do. The good column, the first column.
Mhm.
It's also magically, and this wasn't on purpose, better is 2 ballot measures away.
Yeah, the better column is stuff that accumulates over time.
Mhm. Yeah. And the bear and the existing is, or the good is just sort of non-accumulation of
Yeah.
capital.
No good is stay status quo and do nothing, which is not sustainable. We have to increase wages to stay competitive so that we can retain the people that we have.
Right. Okay, well, it sounds like some questions about the capital fund and, whether it's a goal or an explicit intent to sort of have that, build up that capital fund. I think outstanding question is that sufficient or not? But that's what, the survey team will kind of model out, and you'll give you some really good input on kind of what the tolerance is, I guess, and you all can make policy decisions based off of that. Good? Yeah.
Ellie, did I hear you say that the good is not?
No.
Existing.
Doing nothing right now is not sustainable.
Okay.
it's. Well, if we had the funding, we can continue the way we're doing, but we need to do a wage increase to have good retention.
Sure.
Of who we have. So that's
Oh,
500,000.
Good time.
Putting 6 people on, we could do that later on. Capital fund right now, we can't do anything capital improvement wise unless we increase revenue to where we're not deficit spending. Right now, we're at the end of this year, I'm projecting that we're deficit spending $940,000. And that has to change before 2029 or 2030. We have no money to do business.
Yeah, so
But
that,
I think the better column there is doable, sustainable, comfortably with those figures.
Okay.
Over the time period.
good. Anything more to talk about modification 2, the funding increase? What's included? Okay.
I think the outstanding question, and that comes to, and it sounds like the answer is now, is like, do we need the IGA to say that the county is gonna run this, or is there confidence in the room that we're on the same page about the need for more funding through a ballot increase? I mean, a ballot measure.
I think the ballot question for the sales tax needs to be separate and not in the IGA, because that needs to be on the ballot in springtime in case it doesn't work, so we can go back to the ballot again in November. Because that sales tax is the only way it's gonna work.
Yeah, with 9 mills.
A mill increase question on the ballot is only gonna bring in $750,000 additional, and that's not enough to do any capital stuff, and that will not that won't even correct the deficit spending issue.
So your thought is it doesn't need to be
The funding needs to be
In the-
decided
in the ballot, in the
and
IGA?
done before the IGA is done. Or at least
Funding?
consider that.
We're thinking of the sales.
The sales tax ballot question, that needs to be decided along with the IGA issue. But there needs to be a consensus that we ask for that to be on the ballot in May, the spring ballot.
25.
The-
But the IGA is gonna be revised in early November after your board's
So in the IGA currently allows the participants to fund up to 10 mills. Do we really want the sales tax initiative to be in the IGA? Just a thought from me.
I think I agree.
I think it would be more flexible to manage that and do that if it's not tied to the IGA.
Mitch?
Mitch.
Thanks. You know, it might not be enforceable in the IGA, but I would sure like to see the next Board of County Commissioners' feet held to the fire, so to speak, so that they move forward with the ballot initiative for the sales tax to fund the fire authority.
So it gives
So
more,
from-
it gives more impetus, or it's more of a accountability measure by having it in the IGA.
I'm gonna ask the question if others might feel that is true. Yes.
I'm concerned that we haven't had the opportunity to go back to our full boards and discuss the sales tax impact on each of our municipalities. And so that we're prepared for the trickle down because it's not just fire authority. we've got the whole pot to look at, so. If that's going to limit it by putting it in the IGA, then let's not put that in the IGA. But let's not hold the IGA to that sales tax. That gives us the opportunity to massage it a bit if we have to. I'm not saying that's my opinion on it. I think there's two of us here.
It's an interesting notion about toggling back and forth between accountability and flexibility on this one. Again, as if we had that on the sort of representation piece as well. So, yeah, go ahead, George, and then so.
I think Barry's comment is really wise, right? Like, this is not the only board that is gonna have to think about this, and it deserves time to think about this, right? As elected officials, we have a lot of stuff to balance. We could put a number in there. We could say the county will commit to. That gets tough too, because when you start talking about mills, you can't have the same number. What I was gonna say is the county will commit to a tax increase that will bring in new revenues, at least $2.4 million.
Tax increase question,
Yeah.
because we can't
Tax increase.
question, well, yeah, because we can't commit to the number unless it's.
So we could do that, but then, I mean, if we end up for some reason going the mill route, we would end up for some reason. Like all of a sudden we would, the math doesn't work. I do like where Mitch's head is at in terms of documenting progress, helping encourage new county commissioners to support this.
If it doesn't go in the IGA, what kind of leverage is there to say that they will commit to asking for it?
Right. I'll suggest there's a political leverage around refusing to fund a fire department. Refusing to at least give people the option to fund it.
No, I'm just asking. That has not been addressed.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's just my.
Randy.
Yeah, I kind of like, in terms of inspiring or incentivizing or, encouraging, kind of like nailing the souls to the floor or something like that, or saying we will do that. And I guess that's a bad metaphor because it means staying where you are.
They're not moving that.
That wouldn't be safe, Randy. That wouldn't be safe.
Might hurt.
Not in a fire.
Excuse me. I think, yeah, I think we should have language that at least, even if we can't name a number, that at least says that we would find the revenues or increase taxes, to the extent that we can eliminate the deficit and improve to some measure that we agree upon, improve what we have, our financial picture to some measure that we can put a finger on. I don't think, as Peter said, we can't state what we're going to do exactly. We can't say what that tax increase is going to be, but if we can describe the bar that we've got to get over and say that that's the commitment we've made, I think it's important.
Okay.
Hey, this is Mitch. I just want to share this group that we had a prospective county commissioner, someone that's running, at our last meeting, tell us that the fire authority didn't need any more money.
That's a good point.
I didn't hear it that way.
Who's he talking about?
I have a suggestion. What if it's just like the jurisdictions are committed to increasing revenues, at least at this amount? I mean, at least it's something, right? And it's,
Doesn't say how necessarily, or.
By any means that
Or
statute and, allows, yeah.
Well, I don't think that hurts.
No.
What if we come back, what if we take this question and maybe, think about some language that we could come back to related to this, which is like balancing this issue of flexibility with some degree of accountability for raising additional revenue, to overcome eliminate the deficit and to build that capital fund for those projects. And, maybe we sort of have talked about this enough that there's something there, and maybe I'm looking at you, Peter, in terms of kind of as the drafter of the revised IGA, and maybe we kind of come up with some language for your review related to this to try to balance we don't want to tie your hands necessarily, and yet we sort of want to make sure that there's a certainty associated with an effort, and we can't talk about the specifics related to that. Is that a procedural approach here going forward that folks could buy into, and whether or not Peter wants to do that or not, or we can figure out some draft language for that.
So we're encouraging increased funding language. Without tying our hands here.
Which we can't legally do anyway. And I like mentioning all the jurisdictions because I mean, I don't know if y'all have noticed, but the county commissioners are not popular enough to pass a sales tax measure that even would oppose.
I mean, that's sort of the unspoken part here, is that without an agreement about this, that passing something is unlikely.
Correct.
I mean, that's a compelling reason to reach agreement on that. Okay, let's put this on hold for the moment and come back next time around that. But basically, anything else on terms of the funding increase that we need to talk about?
Well, we have consensus on sales tax.
Mhm.
Do we have consensus on a property tax increase? I'm not talking a specific amount, but that we need both.
And the assumption here is, and based off of what Kelly said, is in the 9.1 in order to be able to reach that. Is there agreement on that?
Was consensus clear back before this last IGA for the night? I mean, from the municipalities.
Is there still there?
Up for the ESD,
I'm sorry?
for the services district, ESD.
Think about that.
Start for something. Here are the variables that are in my head that make it hard to answer that question. What if we run a sales tax ballot measure and we find that it's collecting a lot more than we estimated? What if we run a sales tax measure and 3 years down the line, we find a revenue source, like say, for example, what they're doing just down the hill from us in their service on the highway. Those are some of the things that make me think like that 4.5 mil, 4.6 mil property tax increase that would be necessary on the ESD board. Like, I just hesitate. I have a lot of confidence that that's absolutely necessary. And I also I think the IGA as it's written right now, if we determine that it's not necessary for the municipalities to stay at 9 mils, right now you have the option to go back.
That for roughly 4.4 mils difference from the ESD to going to 9 is roughly 750,000. There is no way fees for service of any kind will make up a dent in that. Maybe $100,000 at the very most. We've tried fees for services over our history and it doesn't work. Plus, we're limited by statute as to what we can ask for. So there's gonna have to be some kind of funding come up, if it's a mill increase or not, but it's fees for service aren't gonna do it. We'll get more money from increased assessed valuation than we will fees for service.
That's another factor. And so what I'm doing is coming up with some examples of the things that I think about that might have changed between now and, I mean, let's say we run a sales tax measure next year and it's successful. Am I gonna try to run a mill increase the very next year? I don't know. Like that's, you kind of gotta it gets complicated after that. I like this. I like where it's at. I also don't know, I won't be here. right? It'll be actually a brand new board. I don't know how many of the people in this room that are elected won't be here. Hopefully staff will.
Well, here's what's running through my mind, at least from Idaho Springs perspective, is that, you know, we're very sales tax dependent, and we already, our rate, cumulative rate is pretty high. I think it is for Georgetown too. And I think there's concern, I know there's concern about, you know, at what level is it too high? And I think that's why I asked about the consensus. I think we have consensus about we need to have a sales tax because that's paid in large part by our visitors and by the impact on our public safety. So I don't think anybody doubts that, but I know we have to figure a number, you know, 1% sales tax and the mill levy in order to work out these budgets or what it would cover, but at least in my mind, and I know there are challenges, both the sales tax and mill levy tax increases is, I still wonder if strategically it really needs to be a combination. I mean, we already see that our mill levy is much lower than surrounding entities for services. And as painful as increased property taxes are right now and with increasing assessments, and I understand that dynamic. I also have some pause with, you know, just saying, okay, it'll be a 1% sales tax increase countywide, which puts us over 11%, you know, sales tax. So I just throw that out because I think, you know, there's some angst, I think, maybe in the business community about that. And I don't know what that level is. You know, I think everybody's supportive in trying to find a funding solution, but I'm not sure. Maybe just a sales tax is enough, but you know, maybe if we do a combination, maybe that makes more sense, particularly if we make the case as we're trying to do with the public about, you know, the deficit spending. You know, this is unsustainable to continue as we're going. And we don't have adequate staffing in certain areas. And those are very compelling arguments. And I know it's obviously will take a lot of effort to get those measures passed, but I do still think that maybe it might make sense to still keep in the mix a combination of mill levy and sales tax, whatever those levels are. For instance, our actual property tax in Idaho Springs is 4 point something. It's pretty low. I mean, compared to some other jurisdictions, I think we have the lowest. So yes, at least in Idaho Springs, we might have, I mean, some question of the council, but we could maybe say, okay, we're gonna raise our mill levy to help cover this need for the fire service, but that's our situation.
Yeah.
So I don't know, we just may need to think about that a little bit. That's all I'm saying.
Do you have a proposal or a thought about what could work in terms of that mix, given that it's different in Idaho Springs as compared?
Just for a while, I think we had been kind of, at least in my mind, we were thinking about a combination, you know, a sales tax, something less than 1%, and then some level of mill levy increase. And again, I know that's a challenge because then you're talking about 2 ballot measures and you know, one might pass and the other might pass, and that could be complicated. So, and maybe there is a political will for, you know, 1% sales tax to cover it all. I don't know.
I mean, isn't that part of what the survey is gonna test?
I guess I'm saying this partly with an eye towards the survey. I just don't want to say, okay, it's 1% sales tax. Maybe we have a couple scenarios or something like that.
Okay.
I think that would be important, at least.
Scenarios even in the survey?
Well, I don't know. I know there's a lot of work has been done on the survey so far by the subgroup, but I don't want to. But I just throw that out as a concern because
I think our consultant, we kind of discussed the two on one ballot and thought that both would probably fail. Is the concern from our consultant that if we put two questions, property tax and sales tax, to fund the exact same thing, that in his mind, you run a serious risk of both of them failing.
Okay. That's good to know.
So you would want to sequence them over time, and and is with respect to what needs to be in the IGA, I want to begin with the sales tax because that's where the real revenue is.
Yeah.
And that's where I view the real political potential. And I don't know if I can think far enough ahead to contemplate what the IGA should say about mills beyond what it already does.
I think Mitch and then Randy have had their hand up, please.
This is Mitch. I took my hand back down because the subject of the survey and the combination of sales tax and property tax was asked.
Okay. Randy.
Yeah, my gut, based on all the time have spent dealing with sales taxes in the last year down at the Capitol, the governor's office, the legislature, and locally, and hearing the scuttlebutt, is that the one that's going to be, in addition to it being where the real money is, where there's more money to be had if we're going to sequence it, and we need more sooner if we've got that large of a deficit, is that another sales tax is going to be palatable sooner than a property tax is going to be palatable. The people are quite upset about their property taxes right now, just because of the increase in value of most real estate property. And I think that's going to be a harder sell if you're going to pick one to start with.
Well, I mean, so we're gonna get some more information. I think you have some advice from the consultants associated with the impact of running two ballots, both a sales and a mill levy at the same piece, that there's the broader funding sources for the sales tax. It's bigger body and it comes sooner. And also hear you, Andy, about having some mix of sales and mill levy and in that sense. So coming back to what's in the IGA, I guess that's a question I don't know about. What makes most sense in there? We had talked about sort of just having the commitment of funding revenues and increasing taxes to eliminate the deficit and develop a capital reserve fund. But maybe we can just kind of hold off on that. And I guess on that particular one until we see one, kind of what survey results are, and secondly, we maybe have some language that might include that. But the specific mechanics around that, I'm hearing less specificity, some commitment, less specificity in the IGA. Mike, is that what I'm? Okay. Modification 3, we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but details relevant to to include in the IGA beyond existing language in the IGA is 610. We've already sort of talked about this a little bit. There's an example here at 6.9 about the sort of the looking at the the methodologies, the analysis, financial analysis, all of that's sort of obviously a greater level of detail. And I think the broader question is, what are some of the criteria that we're going to use, that we're going to think about in terms of determining whether to go forward with the Title 32 special district or not? So if we're going to give this a real look, the things that you think are going to be necessary in order to say, or the criteria or the factors that will influence whether or not you move forward or not on that. What do you think? Title 32, so what's the process look like, including some of the criteria? What are the things that you're going to want to see in order to be able to determine whether or not that's a good idea, recognizing you have not made that decision yet? What do you think? How do you know? I mean, what do you need to know in order to be able to, and we don't have that information now, but we want to make sure that we'll be able to answer this question in the affirmative or in the negative based off of what? Is it governance?
No, I just realized that, sorry, I was eating in front of everybody and didn't realize I was on screen. if you're looking at, if you're looking at 6.9, I thought that's what you referenced, which deals with the RFP.
Yep.
I think that entire section would just come out and then you would rely on 610. Which I think you could modify that language if I'm understanding you correctly. If you're talking about the Title 32 process, I think I understood everybody suggesting that we didn't want to get in too much detail. So I was looking more at removing 6.9, maybe changing 6.10 from the authority shall periodically investigate to the parties in consultation with the authority board or the parties themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and just add a little bit to that. I got the impression we didn't want to hamstring ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. And the reason why I suggested 6.9 was one, we talked about, I think you talked about it last time. And secondly, just as an example of the level of detail, we have had that discussion. The IGA partners in consultation with the authority. I think that's a good addition. So I just wanted to, in terms of wanted to make sure that sometimes it's like, hey, yeah, we'll look at it. And you don't define, and then you don't define what it is that you want to look at, and the factors around it. And I'm not suggesting that you need that in the IGA. I just wanted to make sure that we had that conversation in case there was something that you did. A wish list of information. If you had your druthers, if you had a, sort of like crystal ball it, Jeanette, just look right on it.
Yeah, a very simple concept is coming to my mind. I look at all of this and think the reason to go with it is if we can't make what we have right now work. I mean, simple. If we can't make it work with the modified fire authority, then I know there's advantages. There's, we can have taxes on both of them. If I had to say it simply, we work really hard to make what we have work, and if we can, then why would we do all of that extra work? Take it to the voters, take 2 or 3 years to make a change if we don't need to make a change. I know that's very oversimplified, but that I can't help it. That would be my first thought.
At a gut level, it's like if this revised, if this modified IGA is not working, then it takes effort or energy away from a hard look at a Title 32. I mean,
yeah, and we're making a few changes now. If we make those changes, if the sales tax comes in really well, if we decide what we're doing with mills, if it all works, then you look at the two and say, yeah, we're willing to look and see if it's a better fit than what we have, but that would be my baseline. Do we need to make it better, or can we make it work with what we have? Because it's so much work to change it. I know that's very simple, but that's kind of my thought.
yeah, that's good. You want to add?
Yeah, I just think there's got to be a measure we can put in of saying at this point, here's a checkup. Let's check up how we're doing. And if it doesn't meet the line, our measuring rod, then now we start implementing the Title 32 model. So it's very clear cut. We should be at this point, and if we're not, then it's not working.
I think my curveball is a little bit more appropriate now. The IGA calls for a report from the fire chief to each member.
Tell us the.
I've been looking for it.
Annual report.
Funding, 14. Is that?
38, it's page 10. Paragraph 38.
14 is about what you need to say. Revenue, what was that? Yeah, I know the same. Annual report. What if we modified this section to conduct an interjurisdictional meeting where we get an annual report instead of having the shuttle process? And in those meetings, this can come up.
That would be easier for me to work with and accommodate and make it more productive. It's difficult to come up with a year-end report. For example, we've been under the microscope since May of 2021. and providing stuff to consultants and meetings, and it's really difficult, along with all the other stuff that has to be done, to sit down and be a publisher on a year-end report. You know, all the basics of it are simple to put out. The audit, which comes in end of July. Our capital, current capital and stuff like that, that doesn't really change, but I like your idea to sit and have a meeting and a discussion of the actual factual documents. That would be helpful.
Well, and also to have it timed so that it benefits all of the jurisdictions that are going into budget development for the following year. It doesn't really help you if you get it after the fact,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and the budgeting is, currently the budgeting right now is based on the IGA formula, so the year-end report wouldn't affect that at all, really. Other than maybe your thoughts on,
Well, are we hitting the mark? Or are we falling? I mean.
yeah,
I mean,
and that
in every budget, you're projecting and hoping, but it doesn't.
we're always under budget as far as our expenditures, but as far as the additional stuff that's not asked for in the year-end report by the IGA, you know, the information on calls and types of calls and where we're at with membership and that kind of stuff that's not called out in the IGA could be discussed at a meeting like this, and I think would be more valuable and productive.
So what do we call this? If I see a bunch of heads nodding, so is it an IGA evaluation, IGA assessment, IGA partner agreement, on evaluation? Like what is it that you're getting at through this? Is one is that thing, Jeanette, it's about how's this work? Is this working? And what are the factors? Is it from a financial, from a governance, from other pieces? That's kind of what you're looking at. And, you know, what else?
This is gonna be an operational review. How was the year?
Operation.
What was the issues, where we have capital, do we have any capital failures? All that stuff can be reviewed as part of that process, because that capital plan gets updated. Revenues came in as projected or not as projected. I think that's the conversation should be happening on annual basis.
Yeah.
But does that make sense from that perspective? It's literally an operational review, which is everything from how many volunteers do you have to how was your last call? As much detail as I think the group wants to know on a set annual cycle makes more sense to me.
And you could call it the IGA annual partners,
Yeah, exactly.
and that could be some of the detail in in the paragraph.
It might make sense to look, there's stuff you mentioned that's not in this paragraph, it might make sense to, whether it's you or.
It's like response times and turnout times and they might be trivial to a lot of people, but if we're talking 1710 NFP compliance, they're not critical. They're not trivial at all. I'd like to be able to have a meeting where we talk about that stuff and say, yeah, we're meeting the mark, or we're not, we're missing it entirely. This is what we're doing about it.
Yeah.
Because I think open and honest conversation about that is also beneficial.
So there's categories of operations and finance with both the capital and revenue, the, you know, the governance, decision-making, how well are you all making decisions together with this 11-member board, or those kinds of things, the IGA annual partners, would you call it, Brian? Partners review?
IGA partners annual meeting,
Annual meeting.
kind of similar to what Beth was just pointing out, similar to what the EDC does every year,
Okay.
bring everybody together.
And maybe they have some categories that may or may not be applicable for, so here are the things at the IGA partners annual meeting that you want to review, and then presumably if there's corrective actions or there are other things, then you're able to do that on an annual basis, and you do that all
So-
together.
For timing on that, that could be done earlier in the year if you take the audit out of the component and let the audit be a separate report.
Or, yeah, like the municipalities need funding. That's why there are separate paragraphs, right? And this is what you're speaking to, I think. maybe it does make sense, like, get the budget passed, get into the new year. February, March.
I would shoot for like May. The only reason I say that is because we'll run data. We're doing some data processing on my end until sometimes as late as March. Just trying to tweak coding and make sure it's right and the stuff that put in is correct before I run actual reports. So May makes sense, April, May-ish. Get the data done, we know really kind of where we're at, and it's a good time before we go into summer and all that to say, this is where we're currently at, this is how the last year went. Because that's about the same time, about March every year, I do the operational improvement report that also this is for the next year, these are the changes that we're making and why, and we do that about the same time, so this would also be part of that which is response changes, all that stuff comes, I usually do that about March with the crews, and we implement those, and then we kind of track, were we on the mark or were we not off the mark at the end of the next year or today.
For Georgetown, May would be good because as our election cycle works, and I don't know where Idaho Springs, when you do your elections, that could be a good, informational point for new members coming on as we get into this cycle over the next several years, so that people are aware of and then prepare for the upcoming budget come fall. Does that coincide with Idaho Springs and Empires? I mean, I don't.
Mary, I think would be fine with me.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay. So an annual IGA partners meeting sometime in early May. And then we can think about the categories of presentation. Certainly it's on operations, including response times and, capital, revenue, governance. There could be some other pieces that we would highlight. And so to highlight that in the IGA, just about that, maybe not all the details specifically about how that meeting would be run, what would those expectations, but to include that. And then what do we do with the existing 38 annual report? I know I'm getting into now, we're going sort of line by line.
Change 38 from annual report to we'll share a copy of the audit with the partners at the end of July when it comes in. Because that's the one thing that's missing in this operations review is the end of July audit report that goes out to everybody for review before budget time. So if everybody else is done, that's what we're down to. And it's my opinion, of course, but we should, change it to share the audit when it's completed. Like it could be like, August 1st or whatever. It's usually end of July, but it flips a couple days, on how complicated the wildland year was and some other stuff as we did the audit.
Okay. This is too far in the weeds. It could also be functional probably to just add that into paragraph 14. That's a September report.
Perfect. Well, we're making the idea smaller. It's like all over.
I just want to.
Peter, please.
Because I've been making, as you've been talking, I've been making the revisions to 6.9. And it keeps on changing as to whether, are we talking, so we've moved from based on when the annual report comes out to possibly May. And now, George, you're bringing up a different thing from paragraph 14, I think you said, or what I want to make sure is that when you meet annually, you've got the full picture of exactly what you need in order to determine whether or not you're meeting the financial and operational expectations that the parties have. And so what information will you need? Because you don't want to go in with just part of the information. And why is there an annual report other than the auditing requirements, but if it's not going to be fully comprehensive anyway? So I'm asking you to flesh that out so I can make sure we put it in the right place.
Yeah, 14 and 38 are essentially the same thing, different dates. So if we can work on the wording of that, and I don't think we have to resolve that tonight, but today, because that goes into the detail of the actual IGA discussion.
I think you're right.
But for Peter's, sort of perspective, and I think it's a good one, which is making sure that when you come together, that you have the complete financial and operational picture so that you're not, and sort of how that works.
This is how I understand it, and someone correct me when I'm wrong. Paragraph 14 is about the 5 jurisdiction budgeting process between the fire authority and the 4 municipalities. That's why that exists, and that's why it's currently separate from 38, which is about, I would categorize as sort of oversight by the members of the fire authority. Is that helpful? Am I missing something? And that's why, Peter, I was suggesting 38, which currently mentions the audit. Just ends up over in 14, because it's a similar timeline and a similar function.
So the audit would get included with the letters saying your contribution for the following year as follows. That becomes a packet that goes out in September. That makes sense.
I'm not trying to insist on anything.
It makes it easier for Peter to, that makes sense, because that's normally what September is,
So did-
contribution.
So we won't have an audited financial piece in the early May if we did that.
No, that's the only thing that can't
be
be
missed.
in there.
Yeah.
So
So, and the
the funding
suggestion,
request, you also have there that it's due October 15th, which ties into the assessor certification that gives you the assessed valuation for the formula for the funding. So there's 3 things going on there that really need to be tuned up. It's not a problem for the October 15 date for the budget numbers for the municipalities, but the year-end report, I think if we stay with that May time period for the year-end report and separate that from the funding, because you would essentially in October 15th for the funding, you would have had the year-end report presented and discussed in May. Does that make sense?
I think so.
I'm just gonna add, if I'm reading 14, we're too far in the weeds right now, I'm sorry. If we're reading 14, there's detailed capital assets inventory. The plan for the next county fiscal years, that feels like insight and not what the municipalities need functionally to prepare their budgets. And so I might suggest, and Peter, I've got this noted, but you guys, like that first sentence says shall include. I think pretty much everything up to the second before together with, it shall include it shall be the authority's anticipated funding request. That's all you need. You need that, you need the audit. We're too far in the weeds, but that's,
Okay.
here's my concise observation. There's some stuff in 14 that can be 38.
Okay. So maybe that's a homework between now and next meeting, which is just sort of looking at how those 14 and 38 work. Ensuring on the one hand that as you move forward with an annual partners meeting, that you have as much information as possible and including sort of with the goal of oversight versus in 14 having that really be focused on municipalities funding allocation or funding determination for the subsequent years. So I think we've got that. I think if we understand it, let's just see how that works. And I guess I'm looking at you, Peter, about is that enough, or do we need to keep drilling? You're on mute.
That's enough for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks for raising that. Okay. Anything more on that third modification? I do want us to talk about before we how long, what's the lifespan of the IGA? How long is this? Are we anticipating that this revised IGA, we get it all right? We get it to our understanding, both in terms of the governance and the representation, the funding, what's the length of, I know that, George, I know that 5 years had been, suggested. I know there was some pushback about sort of maybe that's too long. We have included an annual reporting, meeting piece. What's your thinking about how long? Let's assume we can come to agreement on terms, and I think we're really close, if I'm understanding that. What's the length of this, and what's some rationale for that length of, is it 3, 5 years? What's, longer?
Go out on a limb. Yeah. I have 5 fingers on my hand.
That's the basis upon which.
I mean, I just like, you're talking about asking for 1 or 2 tax increases, giving the organization time to work those new revenues into actual staff on the ground and see how it's all going. And this sounds like 5 years. It may be 3, but we don't need, I don't know. I'm not gonna argue against a lower number, but I'm comfortable with 5.
Prior to this current one that was redone, the term was 5 years with an automatic renewal of 5 years. And there's clauses within the IGA that allow for calling for discussions to revise that within that time period. And there's also clauses in there that allow for terminations and stuff such as that. And if you do say that we'd go to a Title 32 and it's successful, it would negate that current IGA anyway.
So I saw a bunch of heads nodding around a 5-year, given all of that's going to, what that would take in terms of ballot initiatives and just, the opportunity to do that. Question about the renewal factor. Peter, I saw you take yourself off mute.
I didn't mean to. I think I just didn't put myself on mute, although I'm curious about, and you started to discuss this, are we talking, so you would do 5 years, but do you want an automatic renewal for another 5-year term, or up to 5 years, 1 year at a time? I'm just asking, right now we have it where it's basically up to 2 years, 1 year at a time on this one, but we could make it up to an additional, a 5-year term, 1 year at a time or something like that.
Do others have a sort of, so it sounds like 5 years, it's the renewal, whether it's up to 5 years with, 1 year renewals or 2 years, with 2-year renewals. What's your sense about the pros and cons of that from a policy perspective? The renewal.
I will chime in from a legal perspective, and then just from an ease of keeping continuity, you could just make it a brand new 5-year term, because as Kelly did mention, there is a provision in there that anytime a party wants to renegotiate it, they just have to ask for it. And so I don't have heartburn, because there's also a provision in there that talks about appropriation, and each year, money has to be appropriated. So there really aren't any reasons not to simply have it renew for a subsequent 5-year term. And I would only do one more 5-year term, because that necessitates that no matter what, we have eyes on this, every 10 years at a minimum. So just throwing that out there.
I see heads nodding. Peter, how about discussion? I can't see Mitch's head or Randy's.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. So 5-year with a 5-year automatic renewal?
I would like any single jurisdiction to have the ability to not have that renewal be automatic after 5 years.
So it's automatic unless any one individual says, no, we want to talk about it?
Which is already in there for negotiation.
It essentially says that any party at any point can renegotiate, and that's the equivalent. If after you read it, you would like it more clear, I'm happy to add to it.
Yeah, that was my reading of it, that. So with that caveat, that
My only quibble at this point is request is not the word I would use. I think under the US Constitution, I can request anything I want, whenever I want. I think I'm looking for a little more.
Demand.
Maybe that's where Peter can clear that leg back up, so it's a little more, well, better defined. So
Yeah.
less ambiguous.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, I'm just kind of going down my list, and Laura gave me an extensive list to see if there's anything else that I guess the question would be, kind of feels like we've got there, at least conceptually, in terms of what, and that, Peter, I know you're already working on a draft. Do you have any other major kind of policy questions that need to be discussed here outside of what we've talked about today to start to develop a draft? Any other modifications that, and again, the open invitation from a policy perspective, if there's other policy modifications, we want to put those on the table. But Peter, from your perspective, do you have what you need for a draft? And the next meeting, we'll have the survey folks here. We'll have, and I'm not sure what the timing is on that, but I'm pretty stoked on a Friday afternoon to kind of be to be where you guys are. And I know Jeremy pressed us a couple meetings ago if we were ever going to get anywhere on this one, but I feel you really have. So Peter, thoughts on that?
No, I'm good. I think trying to determine the contributions, the sales tax, that type of thing, that maybe hone in on some language next time is probably going to be helpful. That's the only part that really stands out for me. But working with what we already have in the agreement, I think we can go from there. I'm highlighting some sections that probably require some thought, but nothing significant. I mean, I think we've made personally, I think we've made a tremendous amount of leeway today, or progress today, I should say.
Yeah, good.
We have at least 3 wheels on the bus now.
At least 3 wheels on the bus. And they still go round and round.
I see maps here Jeremy brought with him.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Jeremy's, oh, yeah, we're not gonna end early.
You're fine. I just don't into all this trouble.
5 representatives, right?
Yep.
We did.
So that would do maps, and then I got tied up managing, like, we had multiple calls going on at the same time today. And that seems to be how Fridays work lately.
It's a Friday.
It's like Monday.
Was that eastbound crash? Is that?
No, we had 2 central backcountry called at the same time on top of each other. And so, yeah, typical Friday afternoon, we're allocating resources and trying to figure out how we manage those resources.
And before we end today, we're gonna do a scheduling as well, just looking at calendars.
The QR code on this is active, by the way, so if you're a map person and you want to put it in your Venza and do that, it is active and open to it's actually, I think I made it public, so this map is available to anyone that wants this map. I'm pretty sure I opened up the permissions on it 100%.
Jeremy, can you email this to me?
I can.
And I can get it to the folks who are,
Yep, and I can send the GIS data, the map. I just export it out of my system through Cam and making the large mapping, which is kind of nice.
Add a digital.
I did make it adult size because my glasses say I have to.
I love it. Thank you.
can we scan this and send it to them right now?
Yeah.
And we're gonna have the,
So what just walk us through the colors?
So we talked about the unincorporated part of the county and how we have population concentration. BLD, of course, is legit. we have a really unique population concentration in Dennyville, Lawson, Mill Creek and Fall River, right? So I boxed that out first, which is the yellow box, which includes, just to make everything work, it includes Saxon Mountain with the others. You know, really nothing up there, but it was make a geo box that actually works. The green on the other side is everything from Empire all the way to top of Berthoud Pass. So we have homes up there. We don't have a lot of homes. We have a small population. Grinnell Pass, also a lower population of homes. Area around Silver Plume. It's all low, so that's why it's a larger geo box, because there's less residents in there, but there's a lot of area, there's a lot of risk. The blue box, when we start in Saddleback, and it blocks off the Evergreen Protection District part of the Saddleback. But that Saddleback, Floyd Hill on US 40, US 6, all the stuff from there to the county line, which is essentially Young Ranch in like one building if you get into that side of the county. But that ties into Blue Valley, the area on Blue Valley and 103, the houses are actually off of 103. And then we go back into the same thing. We have a lot of real estate with very few homes until we got back into Chicago Creek drainage, coming back into town. So this was a rough way to add 3 geo boxes if you want to do representatives by we think you should live in this box. That effectively represents our populations that we deal with. This was my first attempt to kind of break that out and do that, if that makes any sense. I think it includes the areas that tend to share the risk. Mill Creek and Fall River have some of our highest wildland risk because of the drainage, or the adjacent drainages. So they share a unique risk that honestly the west of Empire doesn't have. So there's some unique things I think that come out of those communities from a management of the fire authority that I think, as working with those communities as much as I do, they've got a really unique take on the risks that they face and how they manage it. And if our goal is to get those voices into our organization, I think this is a way to do it. Individuals that live on Grinnell Pass having also their own risk because, as we know, Georgetown Valley lines up with the prevailing winds. That's why we blow over locomotives in, the 1890s. Who'd have thunk it? Still a problem. But it's a lower density population. But what they do have in that green box is a whole bunch of recreation. We have Brazen Tories and all this, and we have all this recreation that impacts them in a positive and negative way. That also raises we have the train, the historic lands, and there's some unique stuff in that box that take a little bit different management than the rest of the county does. We get into the Saddleback area and Floyd Hill, that's all changing with the Floyd Hill realignment, which is good. There's some mitigation that goes there. But they share a lower wildland risk overall, but they've got a unique impact from I-70. So they have a different perspective on fire protection when I-70 is backed up than Mill Creek does. If that makes any sense. So if you're looking for voices, this is kind of how I laid it out, and this comes back from just working with these individual residents over the last 4 years, and I get a unique perspective from each group because they have a different take on the system. They have different idea what their risk is. They have different things that impact their daily lives positively and negatively. And I think that the goal, and we've talked about it, is to incorporate that into how we operate. This was my attempt at kind of geobox it out and bring those ideas into our organization moving forward.
Jeremy, that looks good. Thank you.
Nice job.
I'm gonna show this to Matt. Maybe Matt already looked at it. I'm gonna think about it a little bit. I don't think we need to talk about it right now. I don't need to talk about it right now.
We can tweak the lines. Matt can tweak some lines. I would like to tell you I spent hours overlaying the exact grid for like the Evans area. Because we actually, as an authority, cover a large portion of the southern part of the county that you can only access by going through Evergreen Fire Protection District. So if you get into the fun of that, from a, so
Wow.
that's why that line is actually moved over a little bit from where it historically is. Because we don't have homes down there, we do have a Mount Evans, Mount Outdoor Lab and some other stuff that's down in that area that technically falls within our district. But between us and State Division of Fire Prevention Control, they've managed the fire risk in that.
Great. Well, thanks for putting that together and I think along with George, just sort of for all of you to kind of really take a look at that and see if you have questions. Next meeting. We are on Friday the 6th. Brian, from the consultant perspective, survey team, do you have their availability?
Well, they're mostly in this room other than the actual consultant, so.
Yeah.
We meet again.
Week of the 16th
The survey team,
says. Sorry, Jeanette.
meets on the next Tuesday. So the survey team meets next Tuesday, so we just need to be past that.
Just for the sake of just getting us started here, 17th, 18th, is that week, the 17th or the 18th? Tuesday or Wednesday?
We have our
Tuesdays.
Board of Trustees on Tuesday.
The 17th, tough. 18th,
It's a merge.
Day meeting.
my calendar.
The Dr. Cog meeting in the
Yeah.
evening of the 18th.
Yeah, thank you, Lynette.
Do you guys,
Something due on the 18th.
did you want the daytime meeting or it had to be?
Yeah, we could do daytime. So if we did a 1 to 3:30 again,
On Wednesday,
the 18th?
Oh,
Does that
that
work?
for me. Andy, how are you?
We have a board meeting that night. Not that that matters to anybody but me, but
Be nice to have you here.
prepping.
What about one?
Final prep for the board meeting on the 18th.
okay.
So the 18th at 1, is that what you're talking?
That was on the table, but I'm not sure. I'm looking at folks online as well.
Thursday during the day? Thursday, the 19th during the day?
That wouldn't work for me,
Okay.
unfortunately. Only day that doesn't work. Monday the 16th,
Monday's open.
Community meeting.
20th, Friday the 20th.
Oh,
How about the next week, the 23rd? Pretty much.
We have a council on Monday night.
No Monday, Tuesday,
If you wanted to
Tuesday.
during the day, I don't know.
Tuesday at 1?
No. Well, could do it.
Wednesday at 1?
Evenings, Wednesday and Thursday.
Wednesday, Thursday?
Municipality friends, do you prefer evenings?
I prefer during the day.
I'm used to doing evening, so.
Now, wait a minute. Are we now talking the 24th or the 25th?
Either one.
I'm good on the
Do you-
24th.
We have planning
Confirm the
commission
time.
on the 25th. I would prefer the 24th.
24th. Andy, how are you on the 24th?
Yeah, we have a board selection meeting.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but we're talking during the day.
Oh,
Right.
Well, confirm time, please.
24th at 1 o'clock.
That works for me.
Ready, set, go.
Okay.
One thing, is it okay if I appear by Zoom on that one? Because I have an appointment down here at 2.
Yep.
Excuse
Yeah.
me, 3. I have it at 3, which gives me enough time.
Okay. So Tuesday, the 24th at 1 o'clock, 1 to 3:30. We will,
I will cut out of that meeting at 2:45.
Okay, so I wonder if we start with the red line and then move to survey, or just given your time?
Yeah. So Peter, you're gonna have a red line by that date?
I'm sending it to you now for your initial, like you, Brian, your initial thoughts.
Okay, so but
And
you'll have one by the 25th.
Yeah, we'll definitely have one by that time.
So 9:25 at 1 PM.
Or 24?
24th.
24?
24.
Tuesday, the 24th and I had it 1 o'clock to 3:30.
1 o'clock to 3:30.
Do we want to try to do another one on the just looking out? First week of October? Wednesday, the 2nd?
The third is pretty open for me.
Is this a separate meeting or?
I
This
can't,
is the next, this is a subsequent one. We're
Will
trying
not
to
work
get
for me. Will not work for me on Wednesday at 1.
can we?
about Thursday, the
can we go
3rd.
For Thursday?
Thursday would work for me. How are you, Andy?
Yes.
Okay,
October 3rd?
At
What time?
1.
at 1 o'clock.
You have a meeting
I
at
know.
1 o'clock on that day. Brian.
Yes.
All right,
That's invited.
we're good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great work, everyone. Thanks for your time and for your flexible schedules as it turns out. That was easier than I thought it was gonna be. Great, good work. Have a great rest of your day.
Oh, thank you.
1 o'clock. Yeah.
Well, thank